And Rodney, always interesting debates on your forums there at TiderInsider.com. But one that's been going on a lot lately is about replacing Nick Saban. And I know this is a world where we turn our attention. We can't stay focused on the present. We're so worried about the future. But, of course, obviously, Dabo Swinney's name is the most prominent, but others have come up. And I guess my question is, and that's what makes it fun on your side is debate, but why in the world are we even talking about this? Why worry about it now when the head football coach at the University of Alabama has showed absolutely no signs of slowing down, and we don't know what the college football landscape is going to look like when he does retire?
I think that's the nature of it, though, because, I can remember back in the 70s, Coach Bryant was right in the middle of that run, 75, 76, 77, all throughout the 70s. But in that span right there, all of a sudden, everyone started talking about when he's gone, when he leaves. And everybody talked about Steve Sloan. Listen, Steve Sloan was very successful back in that time, and I'm not comparing Sloan and Dabo in any way, but you remember he was very successful. He did a great job at Vanderbilt, went to Texas Tech, and he did a fantastic job there. Then he went over to Ole Miss and, didn't do quite as well. But everybody talked about Steve Sloan would be the next Alabama football coach, and I think that's just part of it, Gary. But at the same time, I am like you. I don't understand it. Nick Saban is obviously gearing up to continue this run, even try to take it to another level if that's possible, which 5 out of 9 seems like it would be impossible.
The fact that Nick Saban has dominated college football and won 5 of the last 9 national championships, one at LSU, and you only have 3 other coaches coaching in college football at the highest level that have won national championships. It just puts it in, you got Urban Meyer, he's done it 3 times, but then you've got Dabo and Fisher just with 1 and Nick Saban with 6. Now listen, this is not to take anything away from Coach Bryant, because obviously what he did was incredible too. But you had an era there when he was coaching in the 60s and 70s when you had several other coaches that hadn't won just 1, but had won 2 or 3. And what Saban's doing now, I think that puts it in perspective when there are only 3 coaches coaching the game that have national championships other than him.
Yeah. Yeah, they're a lot quicker to pull the trigger now, too, on coaches than probably they were back then.
That's Gene
But all
Chizik.
of those guys all those coaches back then, you want to recollect a little bit. Think about it. John McKay at USC, Darrell Royal at Texas, Joe Paterno, obviously, at Penn State, Woody Hayes at Ohio State, Schembechler at Michigan. We can go on and on and on. All of those teams were known for their not only great teams, but those coaches. You just don't have that right now for whatever reason. You mentioned a few of those who are the figureheads there that are, obviously they haven't had the success Saban's had, but they're, Gary, it's just a different day. It's just a different day than it was back in the 70s and 60s and 70s. Was a great time college football.
I was discussing this earlier on the program. The level that Alabama has achieved is so in such a stratosphere that we're just not familiar with, that everything Alabama does is analyzed. The schedule, people are already picking it apart for 2018. Last year, Alabama getting into the playoff after not winning the SEC championship, getting into the BCS game. But, I said this earlier, people want to act like, again, it's designed to, because there's so much envy. People want to act like Alabama's been given something. They've been given nothing. Nick Saban's gone out and taken everything that this program has accomplished, has been earned on the field. People forget really quickly that when he came here following the 2006 season, this program was the butt of jokes. They're digging up the bear, never going to be able to win again. Alabama's time has passed. Nobody wants the job. It was not tailor-made. He made it to where it is at now. And I know you do too, I get tired of people trying to act like Alabama's been given freebies here. They have to earn everything they get.
Yeah. Well, first of all, going back to your original statement about Alabama never winning, I think that's obviously what people would have loved. The wasn't there an article, Alabama's been passed? No way Nick Saban would ever take the Alabama job. All of those types of things. But there's no question about, I mean, I see this, somebody said Tim Brando had some comments on Twitter. I didn't see them, Gary, so I want to be careful quoting him, but something to the effect about the schedule was a disgrace or whatever. Well, I mean, Alabama's certainly not dodging anyone. They've played some tough schedules. They played just about everybody that's been put in front of them. I don't get it. Let's just look at it honestly. Like you said, Gary, they've earned it. And they certainly haven't dodged anyone. And this schedule coming up this year, you look at it on the surface right now where we are, and you think, there may be hard pressed for anybody to beat Alabama. But, you never really know when some of these teams are going to be much better than what people expect. I mean, and the SEC is always difficult. If Alabama wins it again, Gary, it'll be because they're the best team.
Exactly, and that's as I said, I was discussing it in the first hour, and I don't really want to follow up the same questions with you, but I've read a couple things over the weekend that just really got me started thinking, because usually I try to be very objective, and but it just gets old when people are going back trying to tear Alabama down as if they didn't.
But that's a good sign because. I think that's a good sign because, I mean, it just means that Alabama's still Alabama. They're still at the forefront of the conversation. That's the way it's going to be. And that's the price of being the best program in college football. Let's just be honest about it. Nobody's close. Nobody's close. And that's putting it bluntly, but nobody's close.
Well, you make a great point, because on Friday, this guy named Jason Kirk, never heard of him, for SB Nation, sitting at home in front of his computer, decided to write another story about the 1941 championship. And first of all, it was 1941. Based on the standards of Alabama's silliest title claim, these 78 teams can award themselves national championships. And he's got teams down here, like I said, this gets silly. Teams that are 6-4-1, 8-4, 7-4-1, 6-5. Come on, give me a break. But you're right. It moves the needle. It gets clicks. It works people up, and that's where we're at. As you said, when they're not talking about you in those standards anymore and in those terms, means that you've fallen off the map. And Alabama's been on that end too. Because you're right, Rodney. It's just a great compliment. Hey, I do want to ask you this, because I had gotten into this as well. Because you're right, Alabama has to go out and earn it on the field. This 2018 schedule that everybody's calling a joke. First of all, when they scheduled Louisville, it was going to be a big game. Let's see here. You have to go to Baton Rouge. You have to go to Knoxville. You have to go to Ole Miss. You got to host Mississippi State. You got to host Auburn. Yeah, it's a joke when everybody's looking at it against Alabama. Let one of these teams from another conference go to Baton Rouge, or let another one of these teams go into a Starkville or somewhere, and then let's see what a joke it is. Again, it's Alabama being held to a different standard.
Well, I think, too, it's like somebody said, I don't remember who said this, but made a great point. First of all, it's not Alabama's responsibility to make those teams, Tennessee and LSU and all those other ones, good. It's not Alabama's fault. They play in the SEC, and it's not that they're not good teams. They're not capable teams. But, again, all these teams that they play, it's really, it's just the way it is. It's not Alabama's responsibility to make them any better than they are. So if the people that, some of these people writing these articles, maybe they need to look at these other teams that just maybe aren't as good, or maybe not living up to expectations, and start delving into why these other programs, aren't successful or can't be competitive with Alabama. It's, again, I don't know why that's certainly not Alabama. But you mentioned Louisville, as the opener. Who knew that Lamar Jackson was going to be leaving when this game was scheduled, Gary? I mean, what if he was a part of this game? Then all of a sudden you'd be saying, wow, Alabama's going to be challenged right out of the gate with this great quarterback who's the kind of quarterback maybe that's given Alabama trouble in the past, right?
That's right.
So, and listen, they've got a young quarterback there past. I don't know much about Jawan Pass. I know that Alabama recruited him pretty hard. Isn't that his name, Gary Jawan Pass, as I recall, kid from Georgia? Yeah, I think he's going to be their starting quarterback. Alabama recruited him pretty hard. I think, if I'm not mistaken, again, memory sometimes doesn't serve perfectly, but he and Hurts were two guys that Alabama looked at closely the same time.
Sure did.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's a talented athlete. Yeah. He may not be Lamar Jackson, but he will be able to run that offense the way they want it run. And you're right, Ron. You got to go out and earn everything you get. And people can look at a piece of paper and say, they're going to win this one by 30. But I go back to Vanderbilt game last year, or the Florida State game. First of all, the Florida State game was epic when Alabama played it. I don't care how the season turned out. That was a good team. And, at the time when Alabama went into Nashville, everybody was expecting to be a tight game. Some people were even suggesting a possible upset. Then Alabama hangs 50 on them, and it goes right back to being Vanderbilt. It's a no win for Alabama, really. Because if you know what I'm saying, no matter what you do, people are going to find fault with it, and that's where we're at. Hey, let's look at the West though. As far as you got Jimbo Fisher coming into A&M, you got Auburn coming off one of those. They got to Atlanta, high expectations for them. I think Mississippi State could have a really good football team. Who do you look at in the West that has the potential to keep Alabama from going to Atlanta?
Well, first of all, I think Texas A&M has some players. No question about that. They do come here, but they have some players. I think Jimbo's going to initially, at least, kind of put a spark in that program. He's had success. He obviously knows what he's doing. He's going to put an offense on the field. He's got a good defensive coordinator, the guy from Notre Dame. I think they've got some players to work with, Gary, so they could make a pretty good turnaround quickly. We'll see. You mentioned Mississippi State. They're probably going to have one of their, at least as you look at it now on paper, they're expected to have one of their better teams. They come over here as well. And then you mentioned Auburn. We know that they're going to be pretty good also, and they also come to Tuscaloosa this year. So you've got those three at home. And then you mentioned Tennessee having to go up there, Jeremy Pruitt's first year. The feedback I get from up there is that he may not be saying it publicly. I don't even really know if he's said this or not publicly, but feedback I get is they really they've got a lot of rebuilding to do at Tennessee. So their expectations for this year probably aren't great, but again, you know that they're going to have some players, and you're playing up there in Knoxville, so anything could happen. But listen, hey, what about going to Arkansas? You've got to go up there. Chad Morse is going to have a different kind of offense. I mean, think about going from Bielema to the style that Chad Morse is going to run.
That's right.
So Arkansas could be a team that could be interesting to watch.
You got to play them on the field. That's the bottom line. You got to earn, as I said, you got to earn everything you get. Hey, this is the time of mini camps in Alabama. Of course, teams in the NFL are littered all over the place with Alabama draftees and also free agent rookies. You and I had always looked at Tony Brown as kind of an enigma. So much talent, so much physical ability. At times played good football. At other times seemed to kind of get on his own way. But physically, there's no denying it. How about this quote from Anthony Lynn, the head coach of the Chargers, where Brown is a rookie free agent? It's hard to tell after one practice, but I was just watching him out there at corner. He can play some free safety as well. I thought he did fine. He's picking up the system. He's still learning and has a lot going on, but he's a very gifted young man, very talented. His skill set is off the charts. Now, that's the part I want to focus on, Rodney, because this was a guy that wasn't even drafted. And you and I said we think he'll make a team because of his special teams ability. I think he'll make the Chargers. But for a head coach of an NFL team to say his skill set is off the charts and the guy wasn't even drafted, that's a big statement to me. You agree?
Well, in a lot of ways, it makes you ask yourself why. Why was a guy with those kind of skill sets? And I think it was the other things that hurt Tony, his inconsistencies and for reasons. But I do think this too. I think that the best thing for Tony is that he survived 4 years at Alabama.
That's right.
He stuck it out. He hung in here. Tony's got a much better attitude, a much better perspective because he went through this program. It's going to give him a greater opportunity to succeed because he knows what it takes. Again, Tony had some ups and downs. He came to Alabama. That wasn't that people knew in high school that Tony, kind of had his ups and downs off the field. But he's matured a lot, and I think the things that he learned here at Alabama will certainly help him. If you read some of Tony's quotes, I was, impressed by some of the things he said. And basically that's what he said, Gary, was the fact that, he went to Alabama, taught him what it took to be successful, developed a winning mentality in him. So, Tony's got all those skills. If Tony can manage his emotions really well and, continue to mature, Tony's got the mindset in terms of on the field. He's got the things that it takes to be successful.
Visiting with Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com and Tider Insider TV. Another guy I think to watch. Now, he was drafted, but 7th round. I still look at Bo Scarborough, and I just can't quite figure out why he wasn't drafted a little bit higher. But Nick Saban told Jason Garrett, take him. And I think this, and I know they got Zeke on that team, Ezekiel Elliott, but as a complimentary back, I think this could be a perfect landing spot for Scarborough with not a lot of pressure on him. And with his skill set and that kind of power, I mean, I think this guy's going to have a solid NFL career. I think that was a steal in the 7th round for the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think Bo's injuries, probably hurt him a little bit. But I do think that once again, I think the fact that he played here at Alabama, went through this system, you saw how Nick Saban handled him. If you remember at the very beginning of the 2016 season, Bo had some troubles. He didn't, he wasn't consistent. But towards the end of the year, the way they managed him, you started seeing him come around, started seeing him gain confidence. You saw it against Tennessee. He had the long run, and then things kept building. And at the end of the year, I mean, he finished, Gary, the way he finished that season, he was one of the most dangerous backs in the country. I mean, you saw what he did against Washington. He had that incredible run, had a huge game then. It was having a huge game against Clemson, and then the injury bug struck. So, that's the injuries have hurt him a little bit, but I think he's a lot like Tony Brown from the standpoint of the fact that he went through this program is going to be very beneficial to him because I think Bo's much more mature now and prepared for the ups and downs that it's not just, getting out there on playing ability. It's a lot of ups and downs, and you've got to be able to manage those things. You've got to be able to manage yourself off the field. And again, I just think the reason that you see these two guys getting these opportunities is because they went through this program and that they're going to have a chance to be successful because they went through this program.
Wrapping up with Rodney Orr from Tider Insider TV, TiderInsider.com. Anything to watch for on the recruiting front this week? I know Alabama's sitting here with, I think it's 12 commitments, ranked number 1 or number 2 in just about all the polls. Anything to have on the radar this week?
What is the 18th? Is that Friday?
Yep.
Antonio Alfano commits on the 18th, the defensive lineman from up in Columbia, New Jersey.
You like Alabama here?
I do. Right now, unless something changes, I like Alabama a lot. I think Alabama's going to be the pick over Georgia and Penn State. And, Gary, I've talked to some people, and they think that Alfano's the best defensive lineman in the country. Now, I know he's not rated. He's rated highly. He probably should be a 5-star, and he probably will be when it's all said and done. But, talking to some people I'm talking, former players who, kind of played in it and watched him a lot. They played on the line. They know what the line of scrimmage is all about. And they think that he's underrated. They said that's hard to imagine a guy with, he's got all these skills. He's 6'4", 285. Think about this. I mean, he tests extremely well. 4'8", 40, 37-inch vertical. He's got, you talking about off the chart skill set? He's got it. So, we'll see. But I think he picks Alabama. And I'll say this, too. I think we might have said this on your last show. I think this is just they're just getting started on the defensive line. I think they're going to – I could see Alabama having the number 1 defensive line class in the country as well as the number 1 offensive line class because I do think they're in great shape with Clay Webb, who's probably the best interior player in the country out of Oxford, Alabama, and then also Darnell Wright, the number 1 offensive tackle, according to some, out of Huntington, West Virginia. I think they're in great shape with both those guys. And, they're in good shape with some of those guys over in Mississippi. Nathan Pickering, a defensive lineman. Byron Young, another defensive lineman, Jared Handy, if they get a couple of those guys. And, the kid from Honolulu, Fatui Tuitele, I think they're in great shape with him as a defensive tackle. So you're starting to pile up. This is going to be the class that I think we're going to remember, Gary, is at the line of scrimmage, where Alabama really differentiates themselves from the rest of these schools in recruiting up front.
I'm with you. It sounds like it could be epic. Finally, I guess the far Patrick Murphy crowd has had to be silenced a little bit on TiderInsider.com. Alabama gets the 12 seed, will host another regional for the 14th straight year, and my expectation is they'll have a good chance to win it and advance to the Super. I know you get a lot of softball discussion out there on the board and some frustration this year, but it seems like in the end, Alabama is always in this position and always in position to make a run to Oklahoma City. They almost got there last year and now get to host a regional again, so it's exciting for Alabama softball fans, and the naysayers are having to zip it for just a little bit. I know they'll come back out if he doesn't win the regional, but all's well for now, at least, Rodney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think, he took it to another level. He won the national championship, and you know what that means. The expectations are through the roof every year, and, I think people think you need to probably make some adjustments. And I'm saying people, I'm talking about the naysayers you're talking about, the people who probably think they should be the coach. But he's there again. So, and he got there almost last year. So, it'd be interesting to see, how they finish out.
Rodney Orr, TiderInsider.com. Rodney, I know it's there and waiting if people want to join in the discussion. And some people join and just read the stories and don't participate. But if they want to get in an active discussion about Alabama sports, they can certainly do it at TiderInsider.com.
Yeah, they really can. And Gary, here in a little bit, going to have a piece. I'm gonna take 5 guys. I'm not talking about the ones who enrolled early, but take 5 guys from this incoming class and talk about which ones might really surprise, make an impact very quickly. So we'll have that later on today.
Look forward to that.
TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year.
Join now. Thanks, Rodney.